Hi there, my name is Steven Rosenthal, and today I want to be your guide and show you how 3 different companies using QAD and DocLib are streamlining and simplifying processes in their AP departments. We know at any manufacturer, processing paper documents is incredibly time-consuming and very inefficient. DocLib for QAD is an on-premise or cloud-based solution that automates paper processes like the invoice process in Accounts Payable, resulting in more efficient, accurate control over your business as a whole. Let's get right to it, but before we get started, I wanted to remind you to hang till the end of this training here today for a special limited time offer. DocLib can be used for a variety of purposes, but automating accounts payable is one area that many QAD users see big benefits. Today, I want to walk you through 3 different success stories that highlight how you might automate your AP process for maximum ROI in your investment into QAD. At Nexteer Automotive, their team used DocLib to cut their approval time down from 3 weeks to 15 minutes without reinventing their entire business process to adapt to some standard approval process in a software product. Using DocLib and our powerful workflow engine, Filtration Group was able to implement an AP shared services model, which resulted in cost savings across the organization and also set them up for success in the future for their M&A strategies. Finally, Walbro Corporation used our tight integration to QAD to completely eliminate the tedious manual work of vouching invoices into QAD SE. Let's get right into our first success story and see what challenges Nexteer Automotive was facing. Nexteer implemented what we call the advanced approval routing, the ability to designate specific approvers in the company for payables that exceed a certain threshold, triggering a review. This threshold might be a dollar amount, a variance from a purchase order, or one of several other different data points applicable to your specific business. The primary challenge was payables were getting stuck waiting for manual approval by someone somewhere in the company. In a company, but especially in a large multinational company like Nexteer, having a manual process can really increase the days payable outstanding and cause some supply chain problems. If your company is not processing invoices electronically, then accountability becomes a major issue with approvers. Questions like, where's the invoice? Is it on a desk? Is it waiting for approval? Go completely unanswered, making visibility and determining the status of an invoice very challenging. Nexteer needed better turnaround time and better understanding day-to-day of their payables liability across the multinational organization. They needed the documents available to the appropriate people, whether they were in Mexico, Brazil, Morocco, wherever they were located throughout the world. They needed predictable turnaround times for each of these business units to maximize their cash flow by paying invoices within the terms of their agreements and keeping both the suppliers as well as their bottom line happy. What we were able to help the Nexteer financial team achieve was a turnaround time that went from weeks down to minutes, optimizing their days payable outstanding. So let's take a look at DocLib and I will show you how some of this works. So here we have a standard report out of DocLib using our standard report writer. This report enables a user to visualize all of the open invoices on the street pending approval. As you can see, the report has all the important information about the invoice, such as who we are waiting on, the dollar amount of that particular invoice, and the invoice date. Our customers use this report to get a big picture of invoices on the street and can then get into the details of each of these invoices using the column called Workflow ID. Each of these IDs are a hyperlink to drill down into some of the details of that invoice. Next, in the mobile app here, an approver is able to review a discrepancy in a 3-way match. They have access to all of the supporting documents here, such as a purchase order, a receiving document, in this case a packing list, and the actual invoice itself. This will give them the information necessary to make an educated, quick decision and to keep the invoice moving along in the process. All these documents are automatically linked and provided to this user to make their decision without any user intervention. No more AP people pulling all these documents for the three-way match together. Now, the true value in this type of report in an automated approval process is ease in visualizing your open invoices, the ability to keep tabs on the pending invoices and keep your people accountable to meet critical timelines, while also eliminating the hard costs associated with routing an invoice through the business or paying an invoice late, such as surcharges, late fees, or missing critical lead times in the supply chain. Now, I do want to take a minute and show you how easy it is here to navigate from the DocLib home screens. This is our home screen here to the reports that we were looking at. So at the top navigation, I click on reports, and then I have a series of out-of-the-box reports that come with our report writer. Here I'm going to click on open invoices by approver. I have the option to schedule this report if needed, by day of the month or day of the week. I can also attach this report as a CSV or an Excel file and have it sent to specific people, especially important for those of you who want to send this to a manager, a CFO, or an executive at a regular incremental time, say for a period close, month, quarter, or year. I'm just going to run the report real time, hitting the run button. And then I have all of the open invoices by approver. Here we have the approvers, like I had mentioned, and the workflow ID, which as you can see are all hyperlinks, which we will get to in a moment. Secondly, we have the mobile application here. I'm going to sign in, and it will show me all of the open invoices in my queue pending approval and review. So here I'm going to click on this PO-based invoice, as I had shown earlier, and I can show you here I have the invoice itself, the pack list for the receiving document for the three-way match, as well as the purchase order that is printed automatically out of QAD without user intervention and saved off into DocLib and then automatically associated to this workflow. Then I'm going to type in my comments, okay to pay. Excuse the typos, and hit approve. You can also look at the keywords here associated with this particular invoice, see what the AP resource had mentioned. Please review this $5 variance. I can hit approve and hit yes, or I can hit reject, send it back to AP. Now, for our second example here, Filtration Group was focused on workflow visibility in their project. Their goal is to use automation to implement a countrywide shared service model, saving money and increasing the capabilities of their staff. As a background on Filtration Group, they manufacture many of the filters you use in your everyday life, such as the filters to keep your home cool in your AC unit, to keep your oil clean in your car. Their filters empower machines like AC units or cars to run efficiently and effectively. Now, I'm going to take the liberty of a cheesy metaphor here, but this makes them a great case study on empowering the AP team to run more efficiently and effectively through automation when processing an invoice. Filtration Group needed to effectively manage a scattered team across the country and had no clear-cut way of accomplishing this. They decided they needed to implement a software tool to accomplish this goal, and the tool has enabled the team to effectively visualize their process and continually isolate areas of inefficiency. Before DocLib, they were unable to manage invoices by exception. They were touching every single invoice, and the high volume of invoices caused the team to struggle to keep up with making exceptions beyond just an annoyance, but an opportunity to isolate areas for improvement in the business. A lot of our customers use the exceptions to further automate their process. Filtration Group needed two key components in a solution to enable their staff to accomplish more, be more productive, and enhance the invoice process in the accounts payable department. First, they wanted an out-of-the-box reporting similar to Nexteer to keep tabs on the process as a whole and gain visibility on this process. Second, they needed the ability to get granular in each company for their process and to manage the team from afar. They took a great first step in implementing AP automation and plan to continue to leverage this tool across new business units as they acquire other companies. So they're now able to better optimize their days payables outstanding, leading to optimized cash flow as well as a healthy bottom line. So here, looking at the software a bit, we have a typical screen a user would go to learn more about what happened to a particular invoice. So if you remember the report that we had looked at that Nexteer uses when closing out a period or keeping tabs on what's going on with approvals, there was a key component of that report called Workflow ID. So each of those workflow IDs were hyperlinks. If you were to click on that workflow ID, it would bring you into this screen here, and you're able to get more granular instead of just looking at the big picture. We have three distinct columns in this screen. The first on the left being your navigation. You could use this to review the invoice, navigate to any activities that you may be required to complete for this particular pending invoice, as well as review any of the supporting documents such as the PO or the receiving document for this PO-based invoice. The middle column here is a big picture overview of the workflow status and what has happened to that particular invoice in your process, as well as what's going to be happening after you perform your particular action. So for this PO-based invoice, you can see that during the automated three-way match, we picked up on an unfavorable variance between the PO price and the invoice price. This variance triggered the workflow to route this to the AP person for review. Now, if there was no variance, it's important to note that this invoice would process straight through and automatically create the transaction in QAD, leaving you a full audit history of this invoice. The column on the right here is a more detailed history of what happened to this invoice as it was processed through the business. This helps the user determine exactly what happened when and by whom for this particular invoice. Now to show you how to navigate to that workflow to understand what happened to a particular invoice. Here we're back at the DocLib home screen, and at the top navigation I can either look at my own workflow or I could look at the dashboard for all workflows. So here I have the dashboard. I have a multiple PO-based invoices, no PO-based invoices, as well as a PO requisition that has been routed for approval. But here I'm going to key into this PO-based invoice workflow and the process that it was run through. I have each of my columns, as I previously mentioned, and each of these are hyperlinks. So I can look at documents, as well as perform actions in this left navigation, as well as review the workflow status. Now you just saw how to visualize the workflow when investigating a pending invoice, but I wanted to take a quick step back and go through the full life cycle of an invoice for a moment when using DocLib integrated into QAD. So here we have from the first moment a document is picked up from DocLib via email, a scanner, or anything that you're typically using to bring a document in, all the way through to creating a voucher or a supplier invoice in QAD. So our top swim lane here is the general automated DocLib workflow to pull these invoices in. Now, invoices are going to come into the business, as I mentioned, as they typically would in the business. You know, a lot of people are bringing them in via email. They could be pulled straight off of a scanner or off the fax server. We're also automatically picking up this invoice from each of these inputs. We then perform automated indexing of the document. This means we pull all of the important values we'll need from the document without any user intervention to then determine how we plan to process this invoice through the business. The second swim lane illustrates what will happen to a PO-based invoice, and then the bottom swim lane illustrates the no PO-based invoice process. The lane here in orange, it goes through all of the tasks or exceptions that are managed by AP, department heads, executive, the supply chain, management. All of these tasks are managed here in this orange swim lane. They could be discrepancies in the three-way match, GL coding for a no PO-based invoice that wasn't automatically GL coded, or automated routing for approval with our mobile app, which we had seen a moment ago here. Both of these PO-based and no PO-based workflows are out of the box created by QAD users for QAD users that enable them to automatically process invoices for different parts of the business. So anyway, moving on to our third case study here, I wanted to walk you through how Walbro decided to use our tool to better utilize their AP team and the people and the expertise in that team. The reason Walbro decided to first look at automation of their AP and ultimately selected DocLib was for the optimization of the AP process with an emphasis on automated transaction creation within QAD. Now, if you take one thing away from our webinar here today, I want to make sure that you take away the simple fact that DocLib is the QAD integrated AP automation solution on the market today. Walbro specifically felt as though they were underutilizing the talent in their AP team, and they wanted to keep the team from performing ridiculous, mundane, manual tasks that have no real clear benefit to the business. Walbro was growing at a healthy clip year over year in their market, and therefore the back office processes they ran needed to keep up, otherwise they'd be scaling a largely inefficient, archaic process. This does nothing by way of competitive edge, scaling that type of process, not to mention the tremendous amount of data entry that most QAD users have in the invoice process when scaling to that kind of volume. So they decided they were going to evaluate potential solutions and ultimately decided they needed the tightest integration possible to QAD, since QAD was their system of record. They needed accurate automated indexing of the document, as well as the assurance from an IT perspective that they would not have to reinvent the wheel every time they decided to upgrade their QAD version. They wanted to work with a partner of QAD to give them assurance of this future integration, especially with big changes like the Effective Enterprise or the Adaptive ERP, the EE solution. They achieved these needs by using DocLib, since it is the only QAD solution partner offering full AP automation. They were also able to standardize their process enough to implement the worldwide shared service model similar to Filtration Group, and they were able to scale their business significantly year over year without increasing headcount and without increasing the burden that they were putting on their AP team. So this screen here is one of the most important screens for our customers. I've literally had customers decide to purchase our solution solely based on this illustration, since it so clearly depicts the tight integration that we share with QAD. You can essentially search and retrieve process documents stored in DocLib directly from a QAD browse, eliminating the pain of lost documents, contacting suppliers to recover these documents, and the lack of accessibility to the history of how the documents were processed in the business. Some of my customers, especially when it comes to auditing, will give their auditors secure, unique logins to go in and do their random searches of documents and then look through the workflow process for those particular documents. So here, this is a standard QAD purchase order browse, and with just a few clicks, I can pull up all of the related documents for this PO directly within the QAD screen. It is because of the accuracy of this data stored within DocLib, as well as the integration to QAD, that we are able to provide this seamless integration. Now here I have a standard enterprise edition of QAD instance running. I'm going to open up the standard purchase order browse, as I mentioned, to perform our DocLib web search. Here I have a blanket purchase order that I use for a lot of our demos that I'm going to search for. Directly within the QAD browse, I'm able to right-click on this purchase order, perform a DocLib web search, and it will pull up all the associated documents, saving the AP person a tremendous amount of time, or whoever else needs to look up these documents, looking directly within the QAD application. Here I have the PO itself. Can look at all the keywords associated with that PO. I can also go back and take a look at each of the invoices that have been processed against this PO. Here I have a sample invoice as well as all the keywords associated with it, eliminating the need to, first of all, manually file any of this paper, and second of all, look in multiple systems to look up the documents associated with specific records. Again, this is available in any QAD browse or search. Now, looking back over what we covered today, we started out in Michigan and Saginaw with Nexteer, looking at how we could cut the approval process down while ensuring data-driven, accurate decision-making, no cutting corners. We then traveled still in the Midwest over to Filtration Group in Illinois to see how they leverage the out-of-the-box DocLib workflows for QAD to gain visibility in their AP process and use this to implement a shared service model. Then we decided to travel down south to some warmer weather, so we traveled to Arizona to hear about how Walbro automates the creation of supplier invoices or vouchers in QAD using the QAD supported integration for their financial modules in both SE and EE. They're now able to better utilize their talent they have in the AP department by focusing the staff on challenging work instead of just manual data entry. DocLib is the solution leveraged by each of these QAD customers and has enabled them to transform their AP departments. Here at PIX, we have a decades-long history with QAD in the QAD space, and I'd ask that you consider using our services and software to better your AP process as a whole. To take advantage of staying to the end of the webinar here, please send an email to srr@pics.com with the subject line Need QAD AP Automation so that you can claim the 15% DocLib software coupon here. This is a limited time offer. Make sure you send the email in as soon as you can. Nevertheless, thank you for joining. I look forward to speaking to each of you.